taking my money, they're throwing it away. Look at your palm on you someday. Better hold to your money. Better hold to your money. Better hold to your money, cause you won't need it someday.
What is usury? Nowadays it means lending money at an unreasonably high interest rate. But it didn't always mean that. The definition of usury has changed over time, and interestingly it changed to coincide with the church's changing dogma concerning usury. Usury initially meant the taking of interest, any interest whatsoever, when giving a loan. Through most of the church's history, she strongly condemned usury. But nowadays the church seems to accept it as a part of life. Her prior condemnations are all but forgotten. To me, this is a challenging topic to take on in a playlist, and I've been procrastinating on it for a couple of years now. And that's because this is one change in the church where I can't just simply dismiss it and say, well, this is just one more change that came about as a result of the Second Vatican Council. This is a change to dogma that occurred over a century ago. So I'd like to analyze the change in dogma in a methodical manner in a series of videos. And the logical place to start is the Catholic Encyclopedia. It was written about 100 years ago, and it's really one of my favorite resources. And I probably cite the encyclopedia at least in a third of my videos. And I'm not alone in my respect for the Catholic Encyclopedia because it's regularly cited in scholarly works. The encyclopedia has two articles of interest, if you'd like to refer to them. One is on interest and the other is on usury. And the encyclopedia says, is it permitted to lend at interest? Formerly, the church rigorously condemned the extracting of anything over and above capital, except when, by reason of some special circumstance, the lender was in danger of losing his capital, or could not advance his loan of money without exposing himself to a loss or to deprivation of a gain. But in our day, she permits the general practice of lending at interest. This is enough to set off the alarm for many Catholics. If this was a dogma of the church, then it can't change. Elsewhere in the Catholic Encyclopedia it says, the dogmas of the church are immutable. In an earlier video that I posted, Can Dogma Change?, which I have linked down below, I cited the First Vatican Council, which decreed, God cannot deny himself or ever contradict truth with truth. This means that truth cannot change, dogma cannot change. Even Catholic Answers admits, the church does not have the power to do the impossible, to change or delete divinely revealed truth, which forms the deposit of the faith. Rather, the concept of losing as it pertains to the apostles and their successors has more to do with the church's ability to dispense individuals or the whole church from observing certain ecclesiastical disciplines. During the course of this playlist, we're going to explore, is this a dogma or is this a discipline? But let's get back to the Catholic Encyclopedia. It asks and then tries to answer the question, what is the reason for this change in the attitude of the church toward the extraction of interest? Also, during the course of this playlist, we're going to evaluate all the reasons cited as the justification for the change, and today we're going to start with this one from the encyclopedia. No absolute prohibition can be found in the Old Testament. At most, Exodus and Deuteronomy forbid the taking of interest by one Jew from another. So let's look at that contention. The Catholic Encyclopedia first cites Genesis. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor, that dwelleth with thee, thou shalt not be hard upon them as an extortioner, nor oppress them with usuries. So this passage forbids the taking of interest from poor people, and the Catholic Encyclopedia is correct that this is not a general condemnation. The Catholic Encyclopedia tells us that there's a second citation in Deuteronomy. Thou shalt not lend thy brother money to usury, nor corn, nor any other thing, but to the stranger. To thy brother thou shalt lend that which he wanteth, without usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all thy works in the land, which thou shalt go in to possess. So the Catholic Encyclopedia is correct about these verses. They seem to prohibit the taking of interest by one Jew from another, although the New Testament does tell us that all men are brothers. But the Challoner notes address this passage in Deuteronomy, and it says, this was a dispensation granted by God to his people, who being the Lord of all things, can give a right and title to one upon the goods of another. Otherwise, the Scripture everywhere condemns usury, as contrary to the law of God. and a crying sin. See Exodus, Leviticus, Esdras, Ezekiel, etc. But the Catholic Encyclopedia told us that at most only Exodus and Deuteronomy forbid the taking of interest by one Jew from another. But Bishop Chandler tells us that there are more verses. So let's look at the additional verses cited by Bishop Chandler. If thy brother be impoverished and weak of hand, and thou receive him as a stranger and sojourner, and he live with thee, take not usury of him, nor more than thou gavest. Fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor exact of him any increase of fruits. Well, this is like the preceding verses. It isn't really a general prohibition, and it only forbids the taking of interest from poor people. So let's look at Esdras. And I rebuked the nobles and magistrates, and said to them, do you everyone exact usury of your brethren? And I gathered together a great assembly against them. Still, I don't see a blanket condemnation against all usury in this verse. But we're not finished yet. Psalm says, Lord, who shall dwell in thy tabernacle? He that hath not put his money to usury. Well, this verse is serious. It seems to say that he who lends money at interest cannot be saved. And there are more verses. Ezekiel says, and if a man be just and do judgment and justice, then he has not lent upon usury, nor taken any increase. But if he has given upon usury, and that taketh an increase, shall such one live? No, he shall not live. Seeing he hath done all these detestable things, he shall surely die. His blood shall be upon him. So the man that practices usury does detestable things in the eyes of God, and he shall not live. Also, thou hast taken usury and increase, and hast covetously oppressed thy neighbors, and thou hast forgotten me, saith the Lord God. So the Bible tells us that he who practices usury oppresses his neighbors and has forgotten God. To me, it's unsettling when the Catholic Encyclopedia says something that just isn't true. But here it's demonstrably true that the Catholic Encyclopedia was wrong, and presumably knew it was wrong, in saying that there was not an absolute prohibition of usury in the Old Testament. The Old Testament certainly forbids the taking of interest when giving a loan. Well, I hope you enjoyed this first installment on this playlist. I hope you come back and watch the rest. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page, which is linked down below. Every day I post additional content that you won't find on this YouTube channel. And please, pray for the church. And finally, please sign the Catholic petitions that are linked down below in the notes section.
Somebody loan me a dime. I wanna call my old time used to be. Somebody loan me a dime, I tell you, I wanna call my old time used to be.